Hi, let's look at how to illustrate the decimal search. Let's look at how to illustrate one of the roots. Makes no difference which root you pick, so let's pick this first one. The main thing you want to show when illustrating the decimal search is that you understand how the method works. And the method works by showing that there is a change in y in the corresponding consecutive x values. To be more specific, we need to show that for this particular root here, there is a change in sign between -2 and -1 in the corresponding y values, and then we should do the same thing for our last decimal search. So how can we illustrate this? The simplest way is to draw an arrow, for example, to point down to your curve and say, look, it is negative, this one's positive, we have a change in sign, therefore we have to have a root. Obviously we can make it a little bit tidier. First thing, you probably want to be able to actually see the intersection between that vertical arrow and the curve at all points, so moving the graph a bit higher up, our label a bit lower. There we go. Let's put an arrow now. Again, you could use this to draw an arrow, and wow, that was surprisingly straight. That will take probably the least amount of time. However, there is a way to draw a perfectly vertical arrow using the point tool. So, entering some coordinates, we will put -2 and 0, aka the point here on the x-axis, and -1 and 0, the other point that bounds my root. Next we need some points on the curve, so let's select the curve, go to the coordinates again, and we want the point at x equal -2, and you can see here, if I go to the text box, by the way, your text box will be automatically anchored, which is not very useful. So you can see that the point has coordinates -2, -5, and we can do the same here. Enter coordinates -1. There we go, there's our point. The label thing is pointing to a not very useful part. So again, text box, it's -1, 1, and again it's anchored. So how do you actually draw the arrows? Well, there isn't an arrow drawing tool, but we can use something that has an arrow, like a vector. So select the point on the x-axis, then select the point on your curve by pressing Shift, right click, and you should have a Create Vector option. There we go, first arrow drawn. Time to look at the second arrow, point on the x-axis, Shift, point on the curve, right click, Create Vector. Now if you're a little bit OCD like me, you might think, well, I want better colors on this, or I don't even want colors because we're going to print it black and white. So how do you actually change the colors? You select the object, double click does nothing, and right click. All your objects should have an Edit Draw option. That changes how thick you want the line to be, whether you want the line to be full or dashed, and finally the color. So I'm going to make my line black, and I made it a bit thicker. Same changes here, right click, Edit Draw options, 3 with black. And there we have it. You could do this for any object, so you can do the same with a curve, and if you wanted a different color you can do that. Let's make everything black and white, and there we go. now you can either copy paste this by going to page copy, or you could crop it by using a tool from Windows. So if you go to the start button, you should have this snipping tool, which works wonders by drawing a rectangle around the area you want, which for me that should be about right. And then we can either save it, copy it, new, whatever. Copy and paste it into a Word document, preferably the one that has your coursework. There we have it. That's how to illustrate an autograph. What you need to do ideally is the integer search, and then if you zoom onto your root, you would like the last decimal search, and then you can do again the drawing of arrows thing, where you explain the fact that, oh look, there's a change in sign, so there has to be a root in between. Select the coordinates. It's going to be a bit difficult to just put them in, but oh well. -1.45161. I'm going to copy this because I will use it for the next 4 points. Select your graph. It's difficult if your graph is black to know if it's selected or not, so that might be a downside to having a graph black. There we go, I've put my corresponding point. The x-axis one, the other one, I can just delete the last 0, and then select the curve, same thing, delete the last 0. And remember, point on the x-axis, point on the curve, right click, create vector, point on the x-axis, point on the curve, right click, create vector. Yeah, yellow, not a good color for coursework because it will not show up even if you print in color. So change your colors if you need to. Remember, you can add text boxes. That's one way of illustrating decimal search.